potentially into Trump. There could be some witnesses crossing over. They don't want to impact the integrity or the roadmap, if you will, of those investigations as well.
And Brian, no charges have been brought related to this investigation so far, at least. But now that the search warrant's been released, now that this affidavit is soon going to be released, could this information impact a case if this does ever go to trial?
It could, and a search warrant is just the beginning of a case, because eventually you bring whatever contraband or items that you found and you create a case on it if you're the DOJ. This could affect perhaps the trajectory of the case in the sense of the defense knowing either the strategy or the direction of the investigation and therefore building their defense. It might not change the case drastically, but it does eliminate the DOJ or any prosecutor's element of surprise, which is something that they really want in a case with this magnitude or any other case.
All right, Brian Buckmeyer, Catherine Falders, thank you both. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell is warning that the central bank's next interest rate hike is likely to, quote, bring pain to some households and businesses. Powell said the labor market is strong but out of balance and made clear the latest inflation report was not enough to secure confidence that inflation is receding.
While the lower inflation readings for July are certainly welcome, a single month's improvement falls far short of what the committee will need to see before we are confident that inflation is moving down.
Now, Powell added that the Fed aims to return inflation to 2%, down from the current rate of 8.5%. He says the next interest hike will be announced next month. And concerns are growing over Europe's largest nuclear plant, now caught in the middle of a war zone. President Zelensky is warning of a potential radiation disaster as Vladimir Putin orders a massive expansion of the Russian army. Britt Clennett is in Ukraine with that report.
Ukraine's nuclear agency sounding the alarm on that situation at Europe's largest nuclear power plant, which disconnected from the grid yesterday for the first time in history.
It was a very serious deterioration of the situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and it happened because due to Russian shelling.
Petro Cotton saying emergency backup diesel generators were able to restore power to the plant. What's the likelihood that it's going to happen again?
This is one step from radiation emergency, actually. So if diesel is just last defense.
These satellite images show smoke near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, where Ukrainian regulators say Russian shelling knocked all 6 of the plant's reactors offline. President Zelensky reiterating the seriousness of this threat, saying Russia has put Ukraine and all Europeans in a situation one step away from a radiation disaster. And in a call with President Biden, the two leaders discussed the situation on the ground, both calling for the plant to return to Ukrainian control. With the war in its 6th month and Russia facing massive casualties in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin adding another 137,000 troops to Russia's military by 2023. And the nuclear agency head this morning telling us that inspectors could access the plant as early as 5 days' time. And he hopes that negotiators agree on setting up a demilitarized zone there to prevent a potential disaster. Diane.
Britt Clennett, thanks for that. And President Biden is facing pushback from members of his own party over his plan to forgive student loans for millions of Americans. Many Democrats are now concerned it could impact the party's chances in the November elections. But the president is touting the plan on the campaign trail. ABC News congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has more on that. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Diane, good morning. Yes, and the president was not shy about touting a recent string of legislative wins and political victories, hoping that it gives Democrats some momentum heading into these very critical midterm elections. Believe it or not, it is now less than 75 days away. So the president held and attended this political rally in Maryland, and he used some of his sharpest words yet against Republicans, saying that some of their philosophy is semi-fascism. But of course, Democrats are facing some uphill challenges here. The president has been experiencing low approval ratings as Americans deal with record high inflation. And now some Democrats in these very tight races across the country are sounding the alarm about his recent decision to cancel student loan debt for millions of Americans. Congressman Jared Golden of Maine called the decision out of touch. Congressman Tim Ryan, who is running for Senate in Ohio, says that this sends the wrong message to Americans without a degree who are still struggling to make ends meet. And of course, this morning, big questions about the impact this will have on inflation and just how much it will cost the government. The White House has been vague, really struggling to answer that question. But overnight, the White House press secretary estimated that it could cost the government $24 billion a year if 75% of eligible loan borrowers participate in the program. That's still pretty low compared to some outside estimates that say it could cost the government $500 billion over the course of the next 10 years. Diane?
All right, Rachel Scott, thank you. And don't miss George Stephanopoulos this weekend as he discusses the student debt forgiveness policy with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. That's this Sunday on This Week. Coming up, the landmark step by California to fight climate change, how the state is planning to phase out gas-powered cars when we come back.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine,
close to the front line.
Here at the White House, destructive Cat 4 storm.
We're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on.
If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place that's spectacular as well. Me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom. 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 Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights.
Welcome back. California is banning the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035. The landmark decision also aims to double the number of zero-emission vehicles on the road in under 4 years. But will people be able to afford those vehicles? Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman spoke with California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Late Thursday, California regulators voting to make the tailpipe go the way of the horse and buggy.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right. Yay.
The new directive will require California to double the number of zero-emission vehicles on the road in fewer than 4 years. And it'll outright ban the sale of gasoline-only cars by 2035.
In California, this is a game changer as it relates to the environment. There's nothing else that will move the needle on greenhouse gases more than tailpipe emissions.
California is the 5th biggest economy in the world, and 50% of its greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. Governor Gavin Newsom today calling the plan a tipping point for the country, with 17 states, including New York, expected to follow.
Our opportunity now to tip this for the rest of the country presents itself.
In a statement to ABC News, Ford praised the ruling, calling it a landmark standard that will define clean transportation. Newsom saying statements like that future-proof the ruling.
The companies will lead that charge. They know where the future is.
Environmental groups say the plan does not go far enough, while auto trade groups consider the speed of change too fast. They cite supply chain woes, most notably the critical minerals used in batteries. And Diane, there are two big challenges here. The first is infrastructure. Can they build enough charging stations fast enough? The second is affordability, and this is a big one. Right now, electric vehicles are about 50% more expensive than gasoline-powered vehicles, and industry analysts expect that to change, however, in the coming years as more competition enters that space and drives down prices. Diane.
All right, Matt Gutman, thanks for that. And some Boston officers are being praised after saving a father and son whose boat crashed in Boston Harbor. The two were out lobster fishing when suddenly something went wrong. Will Reeve has the story.
Hang on. A heart-stopping rescue.
It was so weak, I can't. All right. Help him up, please. Help him up first.
Boston Police Harbor Unit rushing to save a father and son stranded at sea, holding on to just a cooler.
There we go.
The officers racing against the clock to get the pair out of the frigid New England water.
Once we saw the boat first, I think we both knew right then that, yeah, there were two people somewhere here. You could see the fear in their face. They were cold. They looked very tired and weak.
Police say the two men were out lobster fishing when they became entangled in a trap line, causing their boat's engine to fail. The current pulled the 28-footer into the rocks, causing the vessel to take on water, leaving the men stranded about 8 miles from the Boston seaport.
There you go, crawl up.
Officers first assisting the 75-year-old man.
Any medical issues other than being called?
No.
All right. Grab a seat right there. I'm just going to help him.
Followed by his 30-year-old son.
Please. I can't hold on much more.
The pair suffering scrapes and bruises, but grateful to be alive.
Come on in, grab a seat.
Amazing story. Thanks to Will Reeve for bringing us that, and great action on those officers. Coming up, the mission to the moon, years in the making. We'll take you behind the scenes of the Artemis mission days before a major milestone.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on. If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights.
Welcome back. We're getting a look inside the mission to the moon, years in the making. The Artemis mission is set for what could be a historic test launch Monday, and it could pave the way for the next race to the moon and be a game changer for the future of human space travel. Our transportation correspondent, Gio Benitez, has the story.
It's been more than half a century since we pioneered a way to the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
In 6 remarkable missions under the Apollo program, America landed 12 men on the lunar surface and changed the very nature of what humans are capable of.
There's a huge sequence of events that has to happen. It really changes their perspective on everything.
It's a dream come true.
Now NASA's next era of lunar exploration, called Artemis, is set for liftoff, and it will push the bounds of humanity and our place in the cosmos.
You're answering questions that just really haven't been answered before.
Everybody is just focused but also excited to be where we are.
This time, we're going to the moon to stay. NASA's goal is to establish a permanent moon base that will be the gateway to Mars and beyond.
We're going to the lunar South Pole, where we're hoping to find in-situ resources that we can use. We're planning to set up a base camp there on the surface of the moon and develop technologies and operational practices that will set us up to go further on to Mars.
And a next-generation space race is brewing, this time not between the U.S. and Russia, but NASA, SpaceX, and China's secretive moon mission. All that starts with NASA's first Artemis test flight Monday that will send an uncrewed spacecraft around the moon to ensure all systems are go before the first mission with astronauts aboard in 2024. To get there, NASA will be using its highly anticipated Space Launch System, or SLS. It's the world's most powerful rocket, 36 stories high, and exceeds the mighty Saturn V of the Apollo program in many ways.
We have a lot going on, but we need to stop and be in that moment and celebrate that success, because the team that makes that possible, they've been working on this for years.
Years of work to design a spacecraft like the Orion crew capsule, the mission's human-rated module that can support up to 4 astronauts.
This system is a blend of technologies. It utilizes material systems that have heritage all the way back to the Apollo era. Very similar chemistry. So physics are still the same 50 years later.
The only difference is the size. Apollo 3 astronauts, our vehicle can carry 4.
And when all that rocket fuel ignites, well, you know what comes next.
The rocket takes off, we eject the solid rocket boosters, the launch abort system comes off Orion. The whole rocket is trying to get these 2 pieces into Earth orbit. So just one lap around the Earth. Checking them both out, our mission control will make sure everything's healthy. We're committed to the moon after only 90 minutes. Right after that, Orion is going to separate from the upper stage, and Orion will continue on its way to the moon.
The journey will take Orion 3 days before it reaches the moon in the quiet of space. On future Artemis missions with astronauts aboard, Orion will link up with a dedicated lunar station in orbit around the moon called Gateway.
The Gateway is going to be a lunar outpost around the moon. It will be a permanent space station.
Here, astronauts will be able to transfer from the Orion capsule to their lunar lander spacecraft and maintain strong communications with Earth.
We can bring an Orion vehicle in that drops off the crew, and then we have the lander, right? 4 crew will come up in Orion, 2 will stay on Gateway, 2 will go down to the surface.
Designed to be expanded, the station can add more modules if and when new missions and partnerships develop.
For many years, we've had this wonderful, global presence with our International Space Station. Gateway gives us an opportunity to create a permanent lunar presence and continue that international cooperation.
The Gateway Station will also be capable of adjusting its orbit to allow access to all regions of the moon, something the Apollo missions could not do.
Behind us, we've got the Halo module that's actually being built by Northrop Grumman. This right here is our training module that will go over at the Johnson Space Center for our crews.
The station is still here on Earth, with an expected launch no sooner than November of next year. For this first test flight, the Orion capsule will simply gather data on deep space radiation levels as it orbits the moon's surface from a close distance.
So we're going to do a close approach to the moon. We'll only be about 60 miles from the surface of the moon.
The Orion capsule will also fly by the dark side of the moon, where it will break the max distance record of a human-rated spacecraft set by Apollo 13 in 1970. From there, it's a careful trek back to Earth. The capsule will be traveling at 32 times the speed of sound and will need to slow down. A gigantic heat shield protects everything inside from re-entry temperatures that exceed 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's very effective at isolating heat and rejecting the heat of re-entry even at those energy levels, and protecting the spacecraft and the crew.
Parachutes finally deployed to bring the craft to a comfortable 20 miles per hour for touchdown off the coast of San Diego. This first Artemis mission is expected to take 42 days to complete.
This mission being successful is a sign to the world and to the American people that we've been doing our best with your resources, and so thank you. We owe them that.
And while no humans are on board the Orion capsule just yet, candidates at NASA are busy preparing for a lunar mission in the near future, performing tasks and exercises in one of the world's deepest pools to mimic lunar conditions for astronauts. The Artemis program will put the first woman and person of color on the moon and lay the foundation for crewed missions to Mars and beyond.
I love any opportunity we have to work together and cooperate, and it kind of puts us above, space above it all. And something I've heard every astronaut I've talked to and asked about their time in space has said when they look back at Earth and see how fragile it is and how beautiful and wonderful it is, it really changes their perspective on everything.
All right, thanks to Gio Benitez for that, and tune in Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern for full coverage of the Artemis 1 liftoff to the moon space launch right here on ABC News Live. We'll be right back.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine, close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Bring them on. If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place that's spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Can I hug you?
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do? Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
This is ABC News Live Prime.
Thanks so much for streaming with us.
Live reporting, breaking news, exclusives, award-winning, powerful, eye-opening. ABC News Live Prime with Lindsay Davis, streaming weeknights. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. We want to get right to our top story. The Justice Department is expected to release the redacted affidavit justifying the FBI search of former President Trump's Florida estate. DOJ prosecutors had argued the needed redactions could render the document meaningless, but the judge disagreed, saying it could still provide meaningful information to the public about this historic search. Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has the latest.
A federal judge has ordered the Justice Department to release by noon today a redacted version of the affidavit filed in the search of Trump's resort. The blueprint, which reveals what federal prosecutors were looking for and why it was so urgent to take the dramatic and unprecedented step of raiding Mar-a-Lago. As of last night, the Justice Department had no plans to appeal the judge's decision. So today we expect to see the release of the affidavit with some critical information omitted, including the names of witnesses and where the investigation may be heading, with hints of who may be the targets. An investigation so sensitive, President Biden was not briefed on the search.
I didn't have any advance notice. None. Zero. Not one single bit.
The Justice Department had argued that a full release of the affidavit could expose grand jury information, the direction of a highly sensitive national security investigation, and put potential witnesses at risk. Prosecutors told the court a heavily redacted document might be meaningless to the public. But the judge has decided that more information must be released. And there's the possibility that the document still could provide some investigative narrative and additional details on the origins of the probe and the search, including negotiation with President Trump's legal team and perhaps a suggestion about the timing of the raid. Republicans have been demanding answers.
If you're going to use the Espionage Act, and if you're going to pursue this criminal investigation, you have to prove intent.
According to a newly released document from the National Archives this week, President Trump had more than 700 pages of classified documents when he left the White House, including some of the nation's most sensitive secrets, among them so-called special access programs, materials which may relate to national defense and other intelligence.
The fact that this had markings like top secret, sensitive compartmented information, or that applying to special programs is really terrifying from an intel perspective.
The former president had been negotiating with the National Archives and DOJ for months to return these materials and was even subpoenaed for the documents. Sources telling ABC News that in June, an attorney for Trump claimed in a statement to the Justice Department that all such materials had been returned. But when the FBI searched the property on August 8th, more classified, secret, and top secret documents were recovered, including top secret SCI, which may involve nuclear secrets and intelligence from allies, electronic eavesdropping, and spies. Trump's team has argued that he had declassified the documents but has provided no evidence to prove it, and that some of the classified material may have been planted by the FBI, a claim he has also offered no evidence to back up. Diane?
All right, Pierre Thomas, thank you. And let's bring in our investigative reporter, Catherine Falders, along with ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer for more. Brian, Trump's attorneys have not openly opposed the release of the affidavit, but they also didn't formally request its release in court, despite how many times Donald Trump called for that publicly. What's the strategy there?
So, Diane, I think the strategy is to see what the DOJ puts out. And this is a strategy that every defense attorney would use. It's not specific to Trump's team. But whatever the DOJ puts out or whatever the court allows them to put out, then the defense gets a second bite at the apple to then say, okay, this isn't enough and push forward, because it's hard to say what is or is not there without some sort of rubric or some sort of initial release of the information. So they're probably gearing up to make a push to get even more information, regardless of what we see today.
Catherine, some Republican lawmakers have called this investigation politically motivated. Democrats have rejected that. Could this document change any minds here?
Well, look, I don't think that it will ultimately change any minds. I think Brian is right about what we might see from Team Trump and his allies, a push to get more information, perhaps. But also you could see, and I've already heard this from some Republicans I've been talking to this morning, that they will just capitalize on this. They will say potentially this document exonerates Trump, even though there will be none of that roadmap, none of those investigative details in this document. So, look, I think we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think that in terms of Republican support or Republicans on Capitol Hill, that it will necessarily change any minds in terms of the politics of that. But the public opinion, obviously, is still up for debate.
Now, Brian, Trump's team has filed a motion to halt the Justice Department's review of the evidence seized from Mar-a-Lago and appoint a special master to review that evidence instead. How significant is that, and what's the status of that request?
So that request is still pending, and I think the significance is that they're basically saying this judge who authorized the search warrant, because oftentimes when you are criticizing the bounds of that warrant, you often have to go back to the judge who may have actually signed off on it, especially if there's no indictment or arrest as we have here. So what the Trump team is basically saying is we want a third party, we want another person who's a little bit more removed from the ins and outs of this search warrant to review it, but that may be premature based on where we are right now in the process.
So, Catherine, what do we know at this point about the evidence that was seized?
So, look, we know that there were 27 boxes. This was at the beginning of this month. 11 of those had classified information. We know, and you heard in Pierre's report here, that this was some of the most sensitive intelligence. We're told that some of this was labeled SAP, Special Access Programs. Only a few people have access to this material.
This is an ABC News special report.
I'm Whit Johnson in New York, and we're coming on the air because the Department of Justice has just released the redacted affidavit that the government used to justify its search of former President Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. Again, these documents just coming out. You can see right there on your screen many portions of this heavily redacted. But we are getting some revealing information. So let's bring in our Chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, and our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas. Both of them will help break this all down. Pierre, let's start with you because you are getting some important information as it relates to probable cause.
With the affidavit is heavily redacted. Large portions are blacked out to protect witnesses and where the investigation is headed. But a newly released document with the affidavit makes clear that the investigation is ongoing and active, noting that there are, quote, multiple civilian witnesses that need to be protected from intimidation or retaliation. But the main thing that the affidavit does is walk us through how this investigation unfolded. First, the National Archives in 2021 learned that there were a significant number of missing presidential records from the Trump administration. As a result of negotiations with President Trump, 15 boxes were sent from Mar-a-Lago to the National Archives in January of this year. What they found was deeply disturbing: highly classified materials. National Archives officials were so concerned that they turned over the boxes to the FBI this past May. We have a breakdown of what was in those boxes. There were 184 documents marked classified, among them 92 secret and 25 top secret. And there were other documents apparently even more sensitive, including one that involved secrets designed to protect clandestine sources. Another highly classified document involved national defense. The affidavit makes clear that the FBI found probable cause to believe there were additional documents at Mar-a-Lago which potentially impacted national security. The affidavit also claims there was probable cause to believe there was evidence of obstruction of justice at Mar-a-Lago. Federal authorities believe they found the missing documents that they were looking for, and now they're urgently trying to protect these witnesses and the information. Whit?
Pierre, thank you. And stand by for us as we walk through this. Let's bring in John Karl, who obviously has been following this very closely. And John, we know the Trump team has suggested openly and publicly that they wanted this affidavit to be released, but they never actually made that case in court.
The former president said he wanted the material released. His spokesperson reiterated that demand, but they were absolutely silent in court on this. When you look at this information, even as heavily redacted as it is damaging, I would argue, to the former president. You see that there is the FBI saw that he had removed considerable amounts of documents marked classified, and this they knew this well before the search of Mar-a-Lago. This was in the 15 boxes that Pierre just mentioned had been turned over after a lengthy negotiation that ran most of last year to the National Archives, and that the Justice Department is outlining what they believe are evidence of crimes. And by the way, one thing that's addressed, although in a heavily redacted way, is the argument that has been made by those close to Donald Trump that he had somehow declassified all this material, and therefore there was nothing at issue here. That argument is mentioned, and then the response to that argument, much of it is blacked out. But what is pointed out here is the concern that the material was placed at Mar-a-Lago in a way that was not secure, and it goes through in some detail the strict laws. I know what you're familiar with the way classified material must be viewed. It has to be done in a secure location. In fact, while Donald Trump was president, there was a setup at Mar-a-Lago called a SCIF, which would ensure that material could be viewed and discussed in a way that couldn't be penetrated by people trying to eavesdrop. Well, none of that exists anymore at Mar-a-Lago, and the concern is that this material, highly sensitive material, was stored in an improper way at Mar-a-Lago, where not only Donald Trump would have access to it, but potentially many other people.
And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out here is, while this search of Mar-a-Lago may have come as a shock to so many Americans. This was a process of back and forth between Trump's team and the National Archives and the DOJ that lasted more than a year. In fact, I think it's worth going to some of the timeline here because the National Archives had pursued these documents for months, as we pointed out. And earlier, as Pierre mentioned in his reporting, in June, the FBI visited Mar-a-Lago, and an attorney for former President Trump claimed that all the classified material had been returned. But then again, on August 8th, when the FBI arrived with that search warrant, they found documents classified secret and top secret. And again, that's what is being revealed here in this unsealed affidavit, including some of the highest documents with some of the highest levels of classification. So let's go ahead and bring in now Mary McCord. She's the former DOJ head of National Security Division, now a professor at Georgetown University. Mary, thanks so much for being with us. And you, of course, were in charge of the division that is doing this search here. So you have some special insight. And I wonder, from your take on all of this, we've heard about the probable cause and the possibility of obstruction. What stands out to you as far as possible crimes that may have been committed?
Well, you know, we've had only a few minutes, of course, to skim over the affidavit, but I do think it's significant that this isn't all just about the mishandling of and retention of classified documents or documents that are national defense information. I mean, that's one of the crimes for which the warrant sought evidence, right? There were probable cause established in this affidavit that evidence of 3 different crimes would likely to be found at Mar-a-Lago. One of those involves the unlawful retention of classified information or the mishandling of it or transmitting it to others. And this affidavit, unlike the warrant cover sheet that we saw a week or so ago, actually specifies the subsection of the law 793E, which is about that unlawful transmission or retention of national defense information. But notably, the other 2 crimes that are mentioned are, one is an obstruction offense and one is an unlawful taking of presidential records, which don't have to be classified at all. And the obstruction offense, I do think it's notable that at paragraphs 52 and 53 of the affidavit, which are partly unredacted, there is reference to this letter, which is attached in full to the affidavit, a letter from the former president to the Department of Justice, making arguments that the president has authority to declassify anything, that the laws about mishandling classified information don't apply to him, and that DOJ has a duty of candor to share that information with any court that would be considering any type of warrant or any type of legal process. And so that makes me wonder a little bit if there is some concern that those arguments being made back in May were also potentially part of an obstruction effort.
Mary, thank you again for your time today. You know, this has been a fast-moving process. It was just yesterday, a few hours after the DOJ submitted its proposed redactions, that the judge appeared to be satisfied with it and then ordered that redacted version of the affidavit be released a day later. So that's what we're looking at, again, right there on your screen, 38 pages. You can see just how much of it is blacked out, but that's for specific reasons that are laid out here to protect witnesses, grand juries, sources and methods, things that could compromise the progress of the investigation. I want to bring in one of our legal contributors here at ABC News, Brian Buckmeyer, who's been following this very closely. And Brian, walk us through what happens next, because we know that the Trump team has also requested something called a special master, and just wondering how this all plays out moving forward.
So the next steps are for the Trump team to look at what is and what isn't in this memorandum affidavit that we're looking at. Now, for most of you looking at it, you think, well, the middle of it is basically blacked out, but the beginning and end has some information, but the end is actually an attachment, a letter from the Trump team to that of the DOJ. And the beginning is just a lot of case law. So there's not a lot here when you think about what did or didn't happen. What the Trump team is going to do is take this and try to pry open as much information as possible. They can either ask, as they've done, to have a master look at it separate from that of the judge who issued the warrant, or they can ask for an attorney's eyes only, where they can maybe look at it, promise not to send it out to anyone else or even to their own client, and try to make the arguments that are appropriate, because the next steps that may happen would be an arrest and an indictment if the DOJ feels that they can prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, thank you. I want to bring back our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, because you've been covering the Justice Department for 2 decades, really. And you pointed out in an internal email to us, and forgive me as I'm sharing it publicly here, but you never in the time of your entire career have really seen something like this where they release this much information so quickly. Why is this such an unprecedented case?
Well, clearly because it involves a former president of the United States. The Justice Department was under enormous pressure to give some sense of why they raided the president's resort. They knew they had to give additional information. You saw the judge, the magistrate in this case, realized that it was such a significant case that more information had to be released. Now, the one thing that really strikes me about this the most is the notion that the Justice Department is really emphasized that they have cooperating witnesses, civilian witnesses that are helping with this investigation. They are making that very clear in this document. It's very unusual for them to make such a broad statement. And also the fact that they're stating flatly that they believe that these witnesses could be subject to retaliation and also intimidation. Very concerning by the Justice Department. And I'm being told that they have to find out how was this material protected while it was at Mar-a-Lago all those many months? Who might have had access to it? That is a critical question, because they remind me that some of this information is among the most sensitive secrets that the government has.
Yeah, because even if authorities have recovered this information, who knows where it's been and who may have seen it. Pierre, thank you. Let's bring in Brad Garrett. He's an ABC News contributor and former agent with the FBI. Brad, I want to ask you specifically where this investigation goes from here now that some of this information has been revealed.
So keep in mind with that, all of the information that's blacked out are investigative techniques. They're references to individuals. To move this case forward, you have to go back to what they had even before they went to Mar-a-Lago. And the reality is there is apparently a lot of evidence to support many of the allegations that you've had attorneys talk about today. So the FBI will continue to do what it always does, is put this puzzle together. They'll look at wiretaps. They'll look at other witnesses. They'll look at movement of documents. They'll look at CCTV, like you do in any other case, obviously with a lot of scrutiny. But all I'm suggesting is this case was much further down the road, I believe, than many of the cases I've worked on in the past because of the special circumstances. Obviously, a former president. That's not going to slow DOJ down and the FBI in moving forward.
Brad Garrett, thank you. Let's bring back Mary McCord. And Mary, I know that you've been taking a few minutes here to kind of pour over some of these other pages here. Do you get any indication that the Justice Department plans to file charges anytime soon?
Well, I think that to answer that, we have to also look at the redacted motion to keep certain portions under seal that was also just released today. And that makes it very clear that the investigation is very much ongoing, right? That there are witnesses whose identity needs to be protected. There's ongoing investigative steps that the DOJ points out, if they were revealed in the affidavit, could lead to someone being able to obstruct the investigation, right? And then, of course, there were the 6E grand jury material that's redacted, law enforcement identifications to protect law enforcement officers, and third-party confidential information. So all of that shows, and the vast number of redactions shows this is very much an ongoing investigation. There are still investigative steps to take. And so I don't think we should be expecting anything imminently in terms of charges. I mean, remember, they gathered lots of boxes. They've got to go through them. They've got to really assess in great detail. And that is potentially being held up by this separate motion that Trump has filed for a special master. So I do, I agree with the FBI agent, former FBI agent you just had on, that they would have been fairly far along before they took such an overt step, but I don't think they're there yet. I think there's more work to be done.
Mary, thank you. Let's bring back John Carl, because I want to get back inside what's going on at Mar-a-Lago. What are you learning about how the Trump team plans to respond? There have been some reports, some questions about whether there could even be a shakeup within the legal team.
You know, the bottom line is that the former president has a legal team that is short on experience. He's been trying to get somebody to take on this case for some time. He's been turned down. I know of personally more than one high-profile attorney who has worked with him in the past, declined to take this case on now. But the big picture here is when you look, even as heavily redacted as this is, when you read in black and white this affidavit saying that the search of the premises is justified because, quote, probable cause exists to believe that evidence, contraband, fruits of a crime, or other illegally possessed, other items illegally possessed in violation of the law. I mean, it's clear that there is a substantial criminal investigation underway here. The other thing that really stands out to me is how long the effort was underway to get the material back. We see here that the National Archives began its effort to get material back from Donald Trump in May of last year. And it wasn't until January that those initial 15 boxes were returned. And we see how much classified information was in those boxes. I mean, Pierre went through the numbers. And that's well before we get to the search, this latest search of Mar-a-Lago, where there was even more highly classified information. And it seems quite haphazard. There's reference in here to newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and other such items amidst this the classified documents. So, what's the Trump team thinking in Mar-a-Lago? Well, I would imagine after looking at this affidavit that the effort to get a serious, experienced criminal defense legal team in place is more urgent than it has ever been for Donald Trump.
Yeah, to your point there, John, right there on page 8, it talks about how highly classified records were unfolded, intermixed with other records, and otherwise improperly identified. John, Carl, Pierre Thomas, our thanks to our entire team here. Our coverage does continue on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. You can also get breaking news alerts on the ABC News app. I'll be back here tonight with the entire team for World News Tonight. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
And thanks, Whit. Breaking news coverage does continue here on ABC News Live. I'm Kira Phillips. The Department of Justice releasing that redacted version of the affidavit which led the FBI to search former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Let's continue our discussion now on this investigation with ABC News' Brittany Shepard, ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Falders, and also ABC News Washington reporter Jay O'Brien. Catherine, let's start with you. Now we know it's heavily redacted. But does it reveal how this investigation actually unfolded and give us some insight into how the Justice Department came to pursue these classified documents, these government secrets that ended up at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club after he left the White House?
Yeah, Carrie, you're exactly right. So these redactions show that this investigation is very much ongoing, that they don't want to reveal any sources and methods that they will use down the road. But it makes very clear, it says, and I'm quoting, the affidavit is replete with further details that will provide a roadmap for anyone intent on obstructing the investigation. They said they had probable cause to believe that there were still documents there, that there was evidence of obstruction after those 15 boxes were retrieved from Mar-a-Lago. It makes clear that in those 15 boxes, that 14 of those boxes contained information that was classified. Now, I want to mention there was also, they mentioned several handwritten notes from the president. They say that this was in multiple locations, so that there was reason to believe that there were more documents in multiple locations, not just that one storage area. And then the codes on some of those documents, HSC, human sources, SI, signals intelligence, highly classified information.
Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas been following this with us as well. So, Pierre, in light of what we know now, there has to be tremendous concern about not only where were these documents being held at Mar-a-Lago, but who saw them and how far did that information go? Information, if classified documents, right, would have been kept in a SCIF, a protected location.
Kira, this is some of the most sensitive information that the federal government has in its possession. As you mentioned, this is the kind of information, top secret SCI, other categories of classification that involve documents that in many cases you should only look at in a secure location, which is impervious to eavesdropping, where you have to have people that have the appropriate certification to look at them, and again, to be in a totally safe environment. That's issue number one. The other thing that strikes me about this affidavit and a memorandum of law that was accompanying it is the notion that the government is saying flatly and plainly that they have, quote, multiple civilian witnesses. Multiple civilian witnesses who have been cooperating with this case and who they suggest could be subject to witness intimidation and also coercion of some sort. So that is indicative of an investigation that's active and ongoing, something that the Justice Department is trying to protect. So again, major significant amounts of classified information. The government claims that this was found out of pocket. And, Kira, we learned the narrative of the time frame. The time frame is that the National Archives began noticing or believed that there were missing documents in last year. They began negotiating with the Trump administration. In January of this year, they finally get 15 boxes of documents, and that includes some of this highly classified material. That very concerned the National Archives. They then reached out to the FBI, who wanted to clearly see these documents. The FBI gets access to these documents in May of this year, and then comes to believe, the FBI does, that there's additional highly sensitive classified documents still at Mar-a-Lago, despite pronouncements from an attorney representing President Trump that all the documents had been turned over. Just a fascinating, unprecedented case.
Indeed. Pierre, thank you. And that affidavit, if you're just tuning in, that led to the FBI's search of former President Donald Trump's Florida Mar-a-Lago estate has been released. We will have continuing updates right here on ABC News Live throughout the day, and a complete wrap-up tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live with Lindsay Davis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kira Phillips. Have a great rest of your day.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
Tonight, a judge orders the release of a redacted version of the Trump affidavit. What will it reveal, and what's next? More Americans turn to world news tonight with David Muir, the most-watched program on all of television.
ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights, the #1 daytime talk show, and #1 in streaming news. ABC News, America's #1 news.
Bring them on. If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place that's spectacular as, well, me. I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends.
Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom! Now that's how you start your day, people.
ABC News, America's #1 news source.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. We begin with breaking news about that affidavit that led to the FBI search of former President Donald Trump's Florida Mar-a-Lago estate. The Department of Justice has finally released this redacted version of that 38-page affidavit, which says that documents related to the national security were found in boxes Trump's team actually returned to the National Archives, and that there was probable cause that more such documents would be found at Mar-a-Lago. It also says there was probable cause that evidence of obstruction of justice would be found in the search of Trump's estate. For more, let's bring in ABC News Chief Washington correspondent John Carl. I mean, John, this is clearly damaging to Trump. And what I find interesting is that his team was not against this affidavit being released. So what are your thoughts here now that we have seen this redacted version?
I think it shows that there's, there's some chaos amidst the president's legal team, clearly still trying to get to grips with what they're facing here. The former president himself said that he wanted this affidavit released. His spokesperson said that. But his lawyers actually never said one thing or another in court. They were actually not a party to this proceeding at all. And now we see, again, heavily redacted. There's still so much, Kira, that we do not know about what was going on here. But what you do see is that well before this search warrant was executed, there was extensive classified information that had been taken by Donald Trump and eventually turned over to the archives. That was that first batch, those 15 boxes that Trump turned over in January of this year. The affidavit goes through something which we were not aware of in detail, just how much contact the archives had with the Trump team about those documents. They first reached out to get what they believed were missing documents in May of last year, and then didn't get anything from the Trump team until January. And then over the course of reviewing those documents, the archives discovered that there was classified information. Now we see just how much classified information, 184 separate documents that were rated from anywhere from confidential to top secret. Extensive information. This is well before the FBI gets involved. So it does look damaging to the former president. But again, there is still a lot that we do not know. We don't know what precisely this information was. We don't know what the evidence of obstruction of justice. That's perhaps the most intriguing thing here. Is the suggestion that this was not just about mishandling classified information. This was about obstruction of justice. So what exactly was being obstructed? That we don't know yet, but it doesn't look good for Donald Trump.
So then let me ask ABC News investigative reporter Catherine Falders, what does that mean? Could this prove that crimes have been committed in any way, and could Trump be held accountable?
Well, look, I think that's the question. And I think while we didn't learn much from what's under the black ink, the fact that much is redacted here shows that they do have a lot of evidence. They have a lot of witnesses that they want to protect their identities. This is further along. This case seems to be further along than we think. I know they've said it's in the early stages, Kira, but they've also said that revealing some of this information could impact other ongoing investigations, potentially where the witnesses cross over here. So I think there's still much more to come on that element of it. But I do think that at least legal analysts would also say that it seems to be much more advanced and ongoing than we might have originally thought.
Well, then let's bring in our ABC News legal contributor and American University Law Professor Kim Whaley. I mean, this isn't just about mishandling classified documents, right, Kimberly? There are other crimes involved here when you talk about obstruction of justice, unlawful taking of presidential records. What could this mean for the former president?
Well, what stuck out to me in part from a legal perspective was that we now know which subsection of the Espionage Act the government is concerned about. All we knew from the warrant was that it was 18 U.S.C. 793. Now we know it's 793E, and that requires a showing that the person who, allegedly committed the violation knew that sharing of the information could injure the United States or help foreign adversaries. There's also language in there explaining more about the problems with sharing information with foreign adversaries. So my question here, and I agree with the others, we don't know the details, but it certainly raises a question as to whether this has gone beyond just possession and into sharing the information with foreign adversaries. We also found out there were parts of Mar-a-Lago that were not searched because they were occupied by private third parties. So will the FBI need to go back a second time? We also found out that there was surveillance showing, or there were some reports from, I should say, news media in Florida that there were vans or large trucks that were moving documents after the National Archives had initiated this process. That's a big question. And then the last piece, as John mentioned, the lawyers' involvement in this, the fact that there was an exchange of information with lawyers, that the lawyers understood the government thought there was classified information and still dragged their feet. I think there could be some real problems for some of these lawyers, if not just ethically as a matter of, their ethics as members of the bar, but also potential criminal liability here, because this is so serious.
So let's bring in Brad Garrett, a former FBI, also a contributor here with us at ABC News. So Brad, sharing info with foreign adversaries, as Kimberly just mentioned, as someone who worked on investigations like this, on raids like this, clearly not with the former president, but you know what is involved and how intense and important and what this could possibly reveal. When you hear sharing information with foreign adversaries, does that concern you? And what does the FBI do now? Because clearly, as we've learned from this affidavit, the investigation is not over.
Well, obviously, sharing with foreign adversaries is just about as bad as it gets. In particular, only looking at the classifications of some of these documents, it makes me shudder to think that you would could potentially hand them over to Russia, Saudi Arabia, some other country. That's going to go clearly to the mindset of the former president. I mean, he didn't take these, I don't think, for the keepsake, and I can take it because I'm the president viewpoint. He took them because he was going to do something with them. I'm going to suggest that whatever is blacked out clearly would show maybe some of the things that we're talking about. The FBI never would have gotten this search warrant approved unless they had an immense amount of information. And so walking into this area of, did anything get passed to foreign adversaries, I do think that is an active part of this case, and perhaps they already know that. But we'll have to see how this unfolds.
So, Catherine, the DOJ has faced criticism that this was potentially politically motivated with this affidavit's release. So what's the immediate political response been like since this was released within a half an hour ago? And what do you think the fallout could be?
Look, well, just seeing from some allies close to Trump, you can see some people capitalizing on the redacted portions of it, right? Saying that DOJ just kept the whole thing sealed. We know that's not the case, but I think even just from talking to a few Republicans in the last couple of minutes, that will probably be what they capitalize on here. They will say that Trump wanted the whole thing released and that he said that publicly. But it's worth emphasizing, as John Carl did, that his lawyers did not argue for that. They were not party to this case. They did not argue that in court. So I think you'll see much more of that and calls to have the whole affidavit released, Kira. But as you know, this is an extremely unprecedented situation. None of these documents are things that we would normally see in the first place, starting with the warrant that was released, or the Attorney General talking about the details of an investigation, for example. So the reaction continues to come in on it, but that's, in terms of the politics of it, probably what we will start seeing more of.
Kimberly, considering how much is at stake here, and you see the redactions, quite a bit of redactions, more than 20 pages out of the 38 pages of this affidavit, do those redactions protect enough information, details to protect the ongoing investigation? Was anything compromised here, do you think?
I mean, well, you know what's I think interesting there is that it doesn't sound like the judge second guessed the Department of Justice's decisions with respect to the redactions. Because remember, DOJ wanted nothing made public. Donald Trump's lawyers didn't take a position either way in court with respect to making the affidavit public. They were complaining, on social media and through their national spokespeople. So I do think the Department of Justice is in this really weird situation where they're trying to adhere to traditional norms of secrecy, not just to protect national security, but also to protect Donald Trump. But the former president is spreading misinformation, and it looks like from the affidavit, this has gone back from the beginning, that at the time that a letter went from the National Archives to Congress saying, we've got this information, or we're afraid that these, national classified documents got out of the White House, Trump's sort of spokespeople were saying that everything that was taken was not classified. So I think it shows a number of things. It shows that Donald Trump probably had some knowledge here. There's even a mention in the affidavit that there are handwritten notes by the former president, on some of these documents. So they're walking a very fine line. I have to assume that given that the judge agreed with DOJ over DOJ's initial objections that this much information is not going to compromise national security, that they threaded the needle as narrowly as possible. And I suspect the threat to national security isn't about the release of this redacted affidavit. It's about what happened in Mar-a-Lago and who saw those documents, if anyone.
And let's just bring it full circle here with you, John. You covered the president, you've written the books. Why did Trump want these documents in the first place? I know this involves some speculation, but look, you got to know this former president pretty well. What could be the theories here of why he wanted all those classified documents in the first place?
It's such a good question. I think part of it is understanding that Donald Trump did not see these as government documents. He saw them as his personal possessions. He saw this as something that belonged to him, not something that belonged to the United States of America. And he knows that information is power. What is in these documents, we don't know. I was always intrigued by the one line on the invoice, the inventory of material taken during the execution of that search warrant, the reference to the president of France. What was that? What was it? What information about the president of France was so significant that it was specifically listed in that list of material taken, specifically listed when there was so little that was specifically listed? So there's some significance there. Was he, did he want dirt on the president of France? Did he want to take that with him? If so, why? Who knows? I think it's notable in this affidavit, the description of that original 15 boxes as including newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and other such kind of, potentially insignificant documents amidst some of the most highly classified material, highly classified secrets that the United States has. It seems like it was all just kind of thrown together in a chaotic way and taken out of the White House during those, incredibly chaotic final 14 days of the Trump presidency that followed January 6th. So why? Who knows? I thought you were going to ask me why did he say he wanted the affidavit released? And I've got one theory on that, which is this affidavit refers to multiple witnesses. The suggestion here is that those multiple witnesses may include people, people very close to Donald Trump. And he wants to know who those people He wants to know who it is that is giving information to federal authorities about what he has done with federal with government documents at Mar-a-Lago. He wants to know. And I can promise you that the Trump team is combing through this affidavit, trying to find clues as to who it was that could have, essentially, to use the, use the mafia term, ratted him out. So, I think that's one reason why you see this affidavit so heavily redacted. Is investigators know that there'll be an effort to try to figure out who the sources of this information are, and they've done a pretty thorough job of covering that up. One other final point. I thought it was interesting that in this affidavit, they actually included a public statement right up there with the Trump organization, political organization, a letterhead following the revelation that the archives had sought these materials. And that statement said the National Archives did not find anything. They were given upon request presidential records in an ordinary and routine process. Well, that statement, quite clearly in the views of the Department of Justice, was an outright lie. Of course, they found a lot in those 15 boxes. They found reams of classified information. And of course, this wasn't an ordinary process. They had been, aggressively pursuing this material for the better part of a year before it was finally turned over. And then we learned ultimately that, of course, that was only a fraction of the material that was turned over. Those 15 boxes only represented a fraction of the material. So it's interesting to see in a government document, in a legal document, seeking, a search warrant of Mar-a-Lago. One of the pieces of evidence is something that was put out in a public statement by Donald Trump that was simply not true.
John, I think you know as well as I know by covering the former president, there is nothing ordinary about Donald Trump.
Yeah, nothing.
And so the story continues. John Carl, thank you. Brad Garrett, Catherine Falders, and Kimberly Whaley. Appreciate all your insight. Coming up, President Biden on the campaign trail defending canceling student loan debt. Well, now he's getting pushback from his own party. Where it all stands right after this.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
The fallout, Biden's student loan forgiveness plan under fire. Now, Bernie Sanders pushing for more. The big questions and the real impacts. Plus, Trump's legal battles grow. New details in the raid on Mar-a-Lago. What will happen next? Sunday on ABC's This Week.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Welcome back. Now to President Biden's move on student loans, providing debt relief to millions of Americans. Well, the president was in Maryland yesterday touting this plan as he continues to get pushback from both sides of the aisle now. ABC News congressional correspondent Rachel Scott joins me now from Washington with more. So since announcing this plan, Rachel, Americans pretty much have been scrambling to figure out whether they'll qualify or not. So what is the White House saying about how long it will take before people can start to feel the impact?
Yeah, Kieran, we are really getting new information in on this. And so this is really important for people who do qualify, who earn $125,000 or less that want to see their student loan debt be canceled. So for about 8 million people, you won't have to do anything at all. The Department of Education already has your income information. Your debt will be cleared. But for other people, this is about probably 43 million other people, you'll have to go onto a website, studentaid.gov. We are just learning moments ago, the White House announced that they'll be launching applications in early October, and that borrowers can then expect relief within 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the other important date that people want to keep in mind here is November 15th. The administration is saying that if you go online and submit this application, if you qualify by November 15th, then you should see your debt either canceled or shrink down before that student loan moratorium resumes at the beginning of the year. So really important dates for people to remember: October to go online and fill out that form, and then November 15th.
All right, well, Biden has clearly been on a roll lately. According to 538, his approval rating has ticked up over 4% since July 21st. What do you think this means for midterms? And Rachel, have things actually changed for the president?
You know, the president has really had a string of legislative victories when it comes to passing the CHIPS bill in Congress, getting that signed into law. We know the gun safety bill that was signed, historic gun safety bill, the first time that Democrats and Republicans have agreed on that type of legislation in some 30 years, not to mention the bipartisan infrastructure package and then the Inflation Reduction Act. I could tell you that these are the sort of legislative victories that vulnerable Democrats who are running in these very tight races have wanted to see. This is what they want to campaign on. But at this point, I could tell you this announcement on canceling the student loan debt, this is getting very mixed reviews. You have most Democrats praising the president for making this move. Obviously, progressives like Elizabeth Warren, even Majority Leader Chuck Schumer was personally pleading with the president to cancel even more than $10,000. But then you do have some vulnerable Democrats running in these very, very tight races. You have Congressman Tim Ryan, who's running for Senate in Ohio. He says that this sends the wrong message to Americans without a degree who are struggling to make ends meet. And so right now, it really remains to be seen what impact this is going to have on some of these Democrats that are running in these tight races that are really trying to edge out their Republican opponents.
All right, Rachel Scott, a lot more to follow straight ahead. Appreciate it. Thank you. Coming up, we are headed to the moon again. NASA taking one giant leap for space exploration, and the next launch expected to be a game changer. We'll give you all the details next.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
And welcome back. We are counting down the days until NASA embarks on its most meaningful mission in decades. Artemis 1, the unmanned test flight, which is scheduled for liftoff Monday, sets the stage for future manned flights to the moon and beyond. Joining me now, systems engineer with Boeing's Space and Launch Division, Christine Ramos. Christine, you have got to be excited. Good to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
This is what
Welcome
your
to
life
Kennedy
is all
Space
about.
Center.
Yes, and an amazing
I've been working
place
on this
it
for
is.
quite a long time.
Well, talk to us about it.
You can feel the energy about it.
Yeah, and building the core stage of the Space Launch System, also known as the SLS, the big orange piece that we know about, we see. Let's talk about what went into that development, and how does it compare to the one that we saw used on the space shuttle in the past?
Oh, it is completely different. I mean, this vehicle is a man-rated evolvable rocket. We can carry twice as much payload than any other rocket, and it's really going to help us set a sustainable future in space, in deep space. It took, gosh, I've been on this program for about 10 years, from paper to manufacturing to test out in Stennis. It takes a lot of diverse people to design and build this rocket.
So 10 years, I look at you and I say, oh my gosh, were you like 12 when you started? You're one of those young geniuses, clearly. What got you, what got you into this, fired up about this? Where did your interest start?
Oh, it actually started in shuttle. I actually started in the shuttle program. I worked on the solid rocket boosters, and following that, I did Constellation when we really needed a transition from shuttle, and then it just evolved to Space Launch System. Yeah, and I think what really got me into this is, you know, we just need to get back out there, back into deep space. We need to start going further and beyond Mars, interstellar space. So it just got me more and more inspired to be in this program.
Well, you inspire all of us. So putting men and women on the moon long term, right, is just one small step, as we like to say, as NASA sets the stage for the manned missions, you know, further into our solar system with destinations like Mars, right? So what will NASA scientists learn from this voyage, you think, that they will be able to use, that you will be able to use in future missions?
Well, for future missions, this test launch is really going to help us with our flight performance, just how we integrate with Orion, because, you know, we need to know a lot just about the Orion module, especially when it comes to re-entry, because that's very critical for our crew. But it's going to help us just really redesign or modify or tweak a little bit for our future missions when we do Artemis 2, Artemis 3 when we're boots on the moon, and then further missions to Mars, Jupiter, Enceladus, Pluto. So this is a very, very important launch.
And it's not just historic, but, you know, it's because it's the main mission. It's Artemis will eventually have on board is what we're talking about. Let's talk about what makes this mission just so unique and so special.
So this is so unique and so special because this is just a new rocket, a very powerful rocket. And we really need to verify and certify this rocket so we can just start putting just substance out in space, just more people, more cargo, a foundation out in space. And we have already a vision of what we want on the moon. This is really going to kick it off, and things are just going to keep coming right after it.
Well, I must mention it's Women's Equality Day, so what a perfect day to talk about this with you and your unique position. We appreciate you, Christine, lift you up. Thank you for being a role model for our daughters.
No, thank you, and thank you guys for all the support. We really, really need this. You know, I'm so excited to just show this off. I'm proud of my coworkers who are going to show this off. We're all very proud of our work, and I hope it inspires more.
Yeah, it will. Takes a team. Thanks, Christine. Be sure to tune in Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern, for our full coverage of the Artemis 1 liftoff to the moon space launch right here on ABC News Live. I'm Kira Phillips. A lot of news straight ahead. Don't go far.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7 straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement.